Let there be light. Actually, today's thing could be let there be dark. Let there be light is easy. You know, you just flip the switch and it's on. But how do you turn on the dark? That's the difficult one. So my name is John Cornicello, and I want to welcome you to my series of photo conversations and tutorials. Normally we're on Monday and Thursday of each week, but this week I'm also adding a special Tuesday edition with Lindsay Adler. And on Thursday, my guest is going to be Rick Salmon. But today's class is going to be on limiting the spread of light. We all love our big soft boxes and big umbrellas and filling the room with light, and everything usually looks really beautiful. But sometimes we want to use a baffle to restrict the light. We're always talking about diffusion and spreading the light. So the opposite of diffusion is a baffle to restrict the light. Today I'm going to be using an Interfit Badger's unleashed battery-powered lights and Interfit modifiers. And if you're interested in Interfit, you can go to Interfit USA's website, and they have a discount code, Cornicello10, if you want to purchase anything from there. But I'm going to start today with a little bit bigger light, this 1x3 strip box. To make this a dramatic photo, I'm going to have the strip box behind the subject, pointing forward towards the camera. Whenever we have a light pointing towards the camera, there's the possibility of getting flare in the lens. And to get rid of that flare, to block the light, I've created a barn door for my strip light out of foam core and a couple of these multi-clips. I think they're made by Manfrotto. So I can just come in and clip this onto the strip light, and voila, I've got this light blocking the camera. It's not blocking the video camera, but it is blocking my camera. So let's take a meter reading here to see where we'll get started. Can everyone see my Lightroom? It should be a big gray blank.
Yes.
Okay. So let's turn on the strobe. I'm metering here. Again, F5. Let's turn on the camera here. Go to F5 and let's see what we get without firing the strobe, so you can see that we should be starting with a pretty blank image. So that's just the studio lights, what we're getting. If I hit the E key here in Lightroom, it'll go full screen. We'll bring this back in front and we'll let Dan in. So now I've turned the strobe on, and let's try that again. And there we see we've got this pretty dramatic light. If we want to open up the shadows a bit, the shadow density is controlled by the environment. So without changing the light, moving it back or forward, or changing the size of it, I'm going to bring in a reflector here. And we may switch to the other camera so you can see what's going on here.
Hey, John, can I ask a question?
Of course.
Just wondering, what's the small piece of gear mounted lower on the stand below the mannequin?
That's the trigger for my strobe.
Oh, okay.
I have one on the camera and one there, so when I'm here metering, I can just press the trigger there.
Great, thank you.
Sure. So I'm going to pop the fill card in now and do another shot. And you'll see we've opened up the shadows a little bit. Another way to restrict the light is, instead of the barn doors, I'm going to put a soft grid on. So let's put that there. And the soft grids just Velcro into the soft box. So the grids maintain the size of the softbox so you get the same quality of light, but they restrict the light from traveling to the sides and up and down so that the light doesn't bounce off things in the environment and fill in. So I'm going to move this away anyway because it's not going to really do that much. And let's see what it looks like with the soft grids on there. So another dramatic image. If you don't have a strip box, but you have like a 2x3 or a 3x4, you can always take some sheets of cardboard and mask off parts of the box to make a strip box out of it. I'm going to switch to a smaller light source here. This is what they call a deep zoom reflector. It's about 11 inches across the front, has a silver pebbled interior. It's deep, so it's going to have a narrow throw of light. And let's put it on our subject here. My power level's at 3.5. That's just an arbitrary number. It really refers to only to itself. I know what the power level's up. 3.5. I want to go up a half stop, I go to 4. Full stop, I go to 4.5. So again, let's take a reading on that one. When I take the meter reading, I point the dome at the light. That's giving me 3.6. Let's see, I'm going to go a little brighter than that. So I'm going up to 4.5 on the power. 5.0. That's a good place to start. I think that's where we were before. Yep. So I'm also going to move the strip box back so it doesn't cast a shadow. Here we're going to get a dramatic light from the front that's going to light the entire face. Head into there. So we got this nice light across the face, but it's lighting the background a bit too. If I want to make the background darker, I can go to a hard grid that pops in there. As I was saying, the grids allow things straight on. Let's switch to this camera here. So you can see me through the grid, but as I turn the grid, you see it cuts off the light. So it does the same thing when it's mounted on the modifier. So
Yeah, that was clear.
John, how many degrees is that grid?
this one's a 10. The grids usually come in 10, 20, 30, and 40. Some may make a 5-degree grid too, but I haven't seen too many of them lately. Again, the grid's going to lose some light here. So let's add down to 3.6. So I want to get it back up to 5. Dial up the power, stop in a half. That's 6 now. That's give me 6.3. That'll work. And we should have less light on the backdrop now, as the light isn't bouncing around the room, but the face stays pretty much the same. Now, sometimes at this point, people think, oh, I'm going to soften it a little bit with a diffuser, and that really doesn't work. Let me demonstrate what happens here. So I'm popping diffusion on top of the grid. This is something you probably should never do. I shouldn't even do it now because people will take this out of context. But when I take this shot here with this on, it's probably going to be almost black. And so now with the diffuser on, I'm going to have to bring the power up. I'm at 6. I'm going to go all the way up to 8, another 2 stops, and see if that's enough. What do we get there? Even at 8, it's too dark. So 2 stops, let's go up to 9, 3 stops. And what you're going to find is that it looks like the shot taken without the grid. Putting the diffuser over the grid just nullified everything that the grid did. And it cost you 3 or 4 stops of light. So if you're working with battery systems, you're really going to run through your batteries really quick. I mean, I guess it's a good technique if you need to cut the light down if it doesn't go down enough. But when you put diffusion in front of a baffle like a grid, it just negates it. So when you see someone doing that, tell them to stop. Talking about power levels here, that brings up a point that I like to talk about. Say my strobe head goes from power levels 2 to 10. I'm set at power level 10 right now, and I want to go to half power. What number do I set the strobe to? Does anyone know or guess?
Is this at 9?
And you go to 6.
9 is it.
9. Oh, yeah.
9,
and
because
half
10
light.
to 9 is half power, 9 to 8 is quarter power, 8 to 7 is eighth power, and so on. A lot of people do get that confused. They think if power level 10 is full and 5 or 6 must be half, but it doesn't work that way. So if you're comparing two strobes, say one is a 500 watt second, another one's a 250 watt second, the 250 watt second is as powerful as the 500 down one notch to 9, not down all the way to 5. You saw the sample images for the class where we're lighting up just the eye of the subject. So I'm going to try to go for that now, trying a few different things. First, I'm going to try a grid on a smaller reflector here. So it's a 7-inch with a 10-degree grid on it. Let's power back on. And see how much that restricts the light. So again, my reading, F9, we're going to take that down. Go back to power level 6. 3.6, let's come up a little bit. F4.5 will work for this. So with the 10-degree grid, there we go. I mean, it's still lighting some of the background, and it's doing nothing like what we wanted it to just light up the eyes. So what if we add a set of barn doors on front of it? So I'm going to close the barn doors quite a bit. See if we can aim them at the subject. Let's do another shot. We're probably going to have to adjust the exposure. Let's bring the camera back where it belongs. So it's still at 4.5. So underexposed. Bring that up and see if I can get a better aim on it. There it is. Let's see what we get here. So it's still lighting the chest and the face, not getting really what we want. So I'm going to open up the barn doors. They're not doing what we need, so let's take them off. What's happening is that the barn doors are too close to the light source, so they just cast a very soft shadow. To get a hard shadow, the interference has to be closer to the subject. So somewhere around here would cast a hard shadow from back there. So I'm going to take a piece of black cardboard here with a hole in it, and let's get a remote trigger going here. So the grid's at the person. So there we're starting to get the look we want. Let me take the grid out to show you what would happen without the grid.
That'd be cool.
There. I think here you're going to see a lot more of the room gets lit up. So if you really want to control it, let's see, the next thing we might try is a snoot. I don't know if everyone's familiar with the snoot. It's a cone that goes in front and narrows the beam of light. It's a nice small opening in the front. Looks like it could possibly do it. So let's change this out. And modeling light on. Snoot pointed at subject. Meter in hand. Pop the flash. 2.8. Let's pop it up a bit in power. 7.5, let's go up to 9 or so. So f4.5,
You're there.
which is where we were before. Go ahead, was there a question?
No, I was saying you're already at 4.5, so you're good, John.
Yep. So let's see what that one, still lighting up everything in the room. So grid on the snoot. Turn up the power a little bit. And
Nice.
still lighting up most of the model. So now we bring in the big gun. Let's take this off and go with an optical spotlight. These used to be pretty expensive, but they've come down quite a bit in cost in the past few months. I think this one's about $129. I'll put a link to it in the chat before the meeting's over. So let's see, turn the model light on. What's going on here?
You have a cookie in that, John?
Yes, I'm going to show you that.
Okay.
So we've just got this slit here, and this slit slides in here. And then I can aim it a bit. Let's see what we get here without changing any exposure. There we go.
Nice.
And we can do other things with this. I'm going to take the gobo out, and this also has an iris in it. So let's just narrow it down there. It might not be narrow enough for what we wanted, but let's give it a try. And while that's loading in, I'm going to put a different cookie into the holder. And let's it's in there, open that back up. So we can get real fancy with these things. And there's a slider on the side here to focus it. And so you get an idea of what you can do with cookie patterns. I'll put a link to the spotlight in the chat too. But say you don't have the spotlight, you don't want to spend the money on it. What's another option? Let's reset here. I'm going to take this off. Let's see what I want to go to. I'm going to bring this light over to the other side of the room. Try not to destroy everything in the process.
Hey, John, this is Joe. I have a kind of related question.
Yeah.
Actually, so in general, you know, you're going to have a subject come in for a shoot, and before they are there, I'm sure you're setting up lights and dialing everything in as much as you can. Typically, you know, I'm sure you get the lights as close as possible, but how much time do you need when you first sit the model to kind of do that final sort of get everything just right? You know,
It's usually only a few
Yeah.
minutes, but it depends. If I'm going for big soft lights, probably a minute or two. But if we're
Right.
doing something like this where I need to really aim things, then we start having to play quite a bit.
Okay.
So what I've done here is now I have the light pointing out here in front of the model. I don't want it to hit the model's face, so I put the grid on it. And I'm going to take a mirror, small pocket mirror here, and try to aim it in and see what we get there. There it comes. Get the
So
mirror.
John, is the light source for the mirror that gridded soft strip box?
Right. The grid is pointing at me over here, and then I'll take the
Ah.
mirror and bring it in. So is that the latest one? Did it pop in?
It did.
Yeah, so it's still a little bright. I'm going to go down even a little more. It's still a kind of big light. So I'm going to see if I can come in even closer here and find the light. I'd have to aim this more that way. There it is. The light, the mirror may actually be in the shot slightly, but I got a guy who can fix that, as Peter Hurley would say.
What Photoshop is for.
Yep. So now we're getting in there tighter. And to go even tighter, I'm going to take a small round mirror. I'm going to take the power down a little bit on this. And let's find the spot. This is one where it really helps to have an assistant. But you can see we're getting to the spot of being able to light pretty inexpensively this effect. And one more, I've taken a mirror and cut a heart shape into it. And let's see if we can get a pattern on the face. I don't know how sharp that's going to be, but so it almost shows. But so far we've been talking about getting light on the person. What if we want to have a regular portrait type light, which I'm going to do with the strip box here. Don't mind the Velcro. So I'm going to bring this light back in. And I'm going to point our gridded light at the background here. 7.1. So we're at 7.1. It's funny how that works sometimes. The less you plan, the more it works out. So that's coming in. So we've got a little bit of light on the background. I'm going to make that brighter and try to place a pattern in there. So I've got a sheet of cardboard here with some slits cut in it. And I'm going to put that here between the gridded light and the backdrop. And see if that pattern shows up. Again, the trick to this is to have the pattern as close to the background as possible and the light as far away as possible. So that's really not giving a distinct shadow there. So I'm going to bring it back even more. See what that gives us. So you can see it a little more, but the light is spreading around it. What I would do here is I'd build some walls around it with foam core so to concentrate all the light into the middle. But we can also take a gel and clip it in here with this.
John, if you were the snoot, the light on the right casting onto the background, would that be creating a smaller source? Would that create
It might help, yeah. We can try that in a second too.
Okay. Just an idea.
Yes, the snoot might concentrate the light a little too much, but we'll maybe without the grid.
Exactly, without the grid.
So there you're starting to see the effect. So let's see what the snoot does for us. So now we've got the snoot on here. Aim it a little better. It's still going to go a little bit around the back. It's still a little too wide a light, but and this is something that sometimes works better with using a speed light, because the speed light you can narrow the beam down. You know, you can zoom it to 105 millimeter or so, and really get that effect to work.
There it is.
So anyway, we get the background for that. one more effect I want to show here now. Now I am going to use a speed light for this one. I'm going to bring in this beaded curtain. Got it set up on a boom arm so I can drop it into place. One of the best accessories for a boom arm is a tennis ball. Put it at the end so you can see it and not walk into the end of it and pop your eye out. So I'm going to bring this in. Turn our subject a bit this way. Turn this light out. And we're going to bring our speed light in. Speedlight is using a pocket wizard, so I need to switch my triggers out. Out a little bit. And I'm going to set my speed light to quarter power. And I've got this grid accessory on it. I think this one comes from Spinlight, but as you said, Magmod makes a grid. A few other companies make grids for these. So let's see what happens with the speed light and a curtain. Here it comes. So I've got this pattern across the subject. I'm going to back up the speed light a little bit, bring the curtain in even a little more. And there you can see that pattern on there. Good. So that's basically the things I wanted to show today. So we can do some Q&A or just any things you want to try. If you like this, I am doing online coaching sessions now. I bill them by the hour, and we do things like this where you can say, well, let's try this modifier, and I'll put it on and try it. So you can compare modifiers without having to go out to the store. And you can find that information at cornicello.com/virtual-studio.
I have one simple question.
Yeah.
The first shot with the strip light, and then I think it might have been the third shot where you first put the grid on. I was wondering if we could just see those sort of side by side or whatever. Just how did the grid addition influence that that original shot? It was the strip modifier with just the diffuser, and then I think the third shot was when you added the grid. I think.
Right. So the first one here was just the strip with the barn door on it. The barn door didn't really affect anything here. It was just to block the light from hitting the camera lens.
Right.
Then I put a fill card in. You see that opens up the shadow a little bit, but that's not really what I wanted here. And then I went to the grids without the fill card. So let's compare with the grid, without the grid, with the grid, without the grid. It's not that super big a difference because the exposures change a little bit too. If I took this and brightened it up a little bit, I can probably look about the same. What the grid is doing is really, if you look at my cursor, the background here.
Yep.
Without the grid, the light is bouncing around the room, off the ceiling and the floor and any walls, and lighting the background. By putting the grid on, I'm restricting it from hitting the background.
That's really helpful because I've been playing with grids, but I didn't really appreciate what you're saying. Is it's really the light that's bouncing around the room.
Yeah. So we don't. Let's see let's look at one of the last shots we did here. Let's pick that one. So the shadow cast by the nose, the edge of that shadow is determined by the size of the light. So that's where the closer the light is, the bigger it is, the softer that transition is. That's for a cast shadow. But we also have another shadow here, which is the nose being blocked from seeing the light by itself, and the cheek because it's turned away from the light. The density or how light or dark that shadow is controlled by the environment. So a bigger light source, unless it's really big, is not going to have much effect on the cheek here. But if I bring a white card in, or if I'm in a small room that's light colored, that's going to open that up. If we're in a dark room or we bring in a black negative fill card, then we're going to go darker with these shadows here. So if you're going to go out middle of the night to the baseball, football field with nothing around you and light someone there with no reflectors, there's going to be very little difference between an octabox, a softbox, a 7-inch dish with an umbrella. They're all going to look pretty similar because there's nothing to bounce back the light and fill in the shadows. But when we're in the studio, the environment controls the contrast.
Yeah. Could you just say again what you were saying about the cast shadow?
Sure.
Just run through that again? Yeah.
The light cast, it's hard to see here, but there's, let's see if this one shows better. I'm going to come and bring that in closer. So this shadow is cast by the nose.
Yeah.
And if it was a small light, so it's a hard edge. If the light was bigger, there would be a transition here. But then we also have this shadow here, and that's not cast by anything. That's just because the cheek is turned away.
Got it. Yep.
So the bigger light's not going to have much effect here, but any environment will have a big effect on this shadow and the shadow inside the nose here.
Yeah, that's really
The size of
helpful.
the light will affect this shadow, its density and transition, and the environment will affect this one. It will also affect this one a little bit too.
Huh. Yeah.
John, in that same shot, I like how you still have a little bit of spill to the right of the frame to create separation of that dark hair from the background. And that's kind of important too, so you still maintain the shape of the head.
Yeah, I don't remember which. So this is just before we switched to, this is the black cardboard. Okay. So yeah, we went from that to that, probably by just going to from open to grid. So, other questions? Anything else you want to talk about or take a look at here?
So John, I was wondering, do you have any rule of thumbs on when you use a grid, barn door, a snoot?
No, I don't. Barn doors, I find, are more useful for large interiors where you just want a pool of light somewhere. In close, as you saw here, they don't really do much because they're too close to the light and they just have such a soft shadow. By the time the light reaches the subject, it's spread out again. So for portraiture, I rarely use barn doors except to block a light from hitting the lens to prevent flare like we did with the big piece of foam core on the strip box. Snoot's another one where I may use it for the background, or I may use it in still lifes, maybe a snoot coming in from the back to put a oval pool of light under a subject. But for portraits, I tend to stick to either the spotlight for these dramatic effects or softboxes and umbrellas for big open effects.
When you say spotlight, were you referring to that optical
Yes.
device?
Yeah, there's a link for that in the chat.
Okay.
And that's focusable. You can put cookies in there. Cookies short for cucularis. Those are those cutouts like we were at before. Again.
Okay.
This type of thing, or that one with the wild pattern that I put in there. Where is that one?
Yeah, I remember that. It looked like that would be good for a background too.
Yeah, it's not really something for the subject, but I just wanted to show you that you can put different things in there. What I've been doing also for some shots is I put slides inside the spotlight. I created a bunch of little patterns. Let me see if I have any here that I can show you. So I printed on overhead transparency material. pattern here. Maybe if I put it against a
White sheet of
white,
paper.
white card, you can see it better.
Nice.
Oh,
So I slip those into the size of this, go in there and project patterns onto the bodies.
cool.
If you go, you can probably find those on my Instagram, which is Cornicello Photo.
John, in doing portraits, is there ever a time where you'll mix an umbrella like on axis with the camera to create a base light? And then if you want really crisp shadows like around the nose and stuff, coming with a small source that may be gridded or snoot to get that hard shadow for control. So you get
I
still
haven't
that.
tried it with the umbrella directly behind the camera, but sometimes I'll put the hard light right in front of the soft light. So the soft light fills the same sort of effect, but they're both coming from the same axis. So the shadows, any shadows would go in the same direction.
Yeah, Tony showed that last week.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
thought that was pretty cool.
yeah, that's a way to do that. Yeah, some people start with the base light and build up. I tend to be the opposite way. I like to start with my main light and then decide if I need anything else. If I need fill, I'll go to a fill card. I try to stay with one light as much as possible, unless I'm going to do an effect on the background or something like that. Even for headshots, I often tend to use just a 2x3 softbox and a reflector, or a 48-inch octa and a reflector.
Keep it simple.
I try to. I try to. So, as I said, I've been doing this online coaching thing. Tomorrow, we got Lindsay Adler coming in at noon Pacific, 3 Eastern. That should be a fun interview. And Thursday is Rick Salmon. I never know what we're going to talk about. He's got 41 books. The full schedule is at cornicello.com/photo-QA. Again, that's in the chat room. Doing these all as a free thing. If anyone ever wants to send me a tip, my PayPal is john@cornicello.com, but you don't have to. I'll just throw that out there.
Are you going to have a webinar on Monday, the 25th, which is Memorial Day?
25th, I have diffusion confusion, one of my favorite topics. What does diffusion really do? So it'll be more about soft light, sort of the opposite of what we talked about today.
Okay.
Then the 28th, I've got a couple of lawyers wanted to come on and talk about contracts and cancellations and starting businesses and closing businesses too. Then June 1st, I think I'm going to do flash sync and power settings, sort of something we still started talking about a little bit about today. And we'll see how flash sync works and high speed sync and things like that.
Yes.
These are great sessions, John. Really been
Thank you.
enjoying them.
Thank you. I
Yeah.
appreciate that.
Really interesting.
As I say, when you don't plan
Yeah.
things, they work out. The more you plan, the more can go wrong.
Thanks, John. Really cool ideas.
Thanks, Mark. Appreciate that. Anyway, thank you all for joining me today. Hope you got some interesting and fun things out of it. I'll put a recording up later.
Thank you. This has
Well,
been
thank-
great. See everybody
Thank
again.
you.